Welcome to episode 114 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing writer and director Afonso Poyart, who did a film called Two Rabbits. It's a very stylized action thriller film. He started out in the industry doing motion graphics, and he really utilized that in this film. He slowly worked his way up in the industry and eventually got to the point where he wrote and directed this film. We go through his whole career, how he got this film made, so stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts, and then just look for episode number 114. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide, how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. A quick few words about what I'm working on. Obviously, the big project now is starting to get the ball rolling on my feature film, The Pinch. I did the Kickstarter last month, so now I'm really starting to kind of get things going. I had a meeting last week with a producer who is going to be working on the project with me. He's actually someone I met through one of my email and fax blasts. I note this. I think it's important to sort of understand how these relationships come together. He's somebody I blasted, sent the query letter to. He liked one of my scripts. He ended up optioning it. It was a free option for, I think, 6 months or 9 months. He had a free option on a script, and he's actually optioned a couple other of my scripts, but we just sort of stayed in touch, and our relationship has grown. I've done some writing for him, just writing up some treatments. He had some projects he was working on, so the relationship has slowly built, and it's all, stuff I've mentioned on the podcast. I think the original option was maybe 2 years ago is when I met him, and he obviously lives in Los Angeles. I live in Los Angeles. We've met a bunch of times, just met up and talked on the phone, and as I said, we've worked on a couple of projects. Nothing's really ever taken off on these things, but we've gotten along, and so just slowly the relationship has built. He's got a lot of experience with producing. He's produced some really low budget films, but he's also produced some bigger films. He's actually working on a pretty big film right now, but he's being nice enough to come and help me with this. So he's and a lot of what he's helping me with is just kind of giving me some advice and giving me some general direction. He's actually in Europe, as I said, working on this film, so everything we've done really has been over the phone and Skype, but he's given me some good advice. And the main thing we're going to start trying to do now is to fill some of the key roles, the key crew positions on this shoot. And that's going to be the first role we go after is the production designer. And that person needs to break down the script in terms of costumes and props, mostly props. I don't think there's going to be a ton of costumes in this script, but really we need someone to start to look at the script from that angle and figure out how we're going to get these props. There is some shooting, some guns in the script. There's a couple of things. I think there's some knives and just there is some random props. There's the guy builds a bomb at one point from Home Depot. He goes to Home Depot, buys a bunch of supplies, and builds a bomb. So we're going to need all those props, and someone needs to really break down the script and start to get that stuff in order. So that's the first position we're going after, is the production designer. And then I had a Skype meeting with a potential DP, a cinematographer, who may come on the project and shoot the film. He's got a lot of equipment, and this is actually someone I met through the podcast. He has been listening to my podcast, and then when I ran the Kickstarter campaign, he actually reached out to me, and really he was just generously telling me about his own experiences with a Kickstarter campaign, and we just got to talking on that. And so depends how things are how we can swing it, but hopefully he can come on and help shoot. But even if he doesn't, he's been giving me a lot of, again, good advice. He did a super low budget feature film a couple months ago or a couple years ago, and so he's been kind of telling me his war stories on that. But anyways, those are the first two positions we're going after, is a cinematographer and a production designer. After talking with the producer this past week, we decided July was probably the best date to do shooting. So that's kind of what we're thinking now is July, probably after the July 4th holiday, we will shoot this film. There's a couple reasons for that. Number one, as I said, this guy is a producer and he is working on other stuff. So he's pretty tied up. He's over in Europe shooting something now, and then he's got another shoot, I think in May. So we're thinking July is probably going to be the best date, but there's a couple of other things that are also beneficial to shooting in that sort of June, July, August time frame. You can get a lot of students that are in film school. Maybe they just recently graduated. They don't yet have jobs. So they're looking to build their resume during these summer months. Sometimes they're still in film school, but a lot of these kids, they're young, they're hungry, they're eager. A lot of them have some technical skills. They've actually learned some technical skills. They've done worked on some films in film school. So if you do your shoot during these summer months, you can potentially get some of these people for a micro budget film. And I'm going to go through actually the budget. That was another thing we did. I'm going to go through some of the specifics of the budget in a minute. But if you shoot during these summer months, you can pick up some of those kids that they're smart and they're eager. Maybe not the most experienced, but hopefully they're smart and they're eager. And you can put them into different production roles, different crew roles, and get them to work just basically for copy and credit. So that's one thing. The other thing, and this is sort of, a maybe, but you can also get some good TV actors. There's some people that, are reasonably famous, or at least they're a regular on a TV show that you've heard of. Sometimes you can swing some of those people in the summer months. A lot of those TV shows are off for the summer. They're not actually shooting until maybe August, September. They start gearing back up. So if you can shoot in July, we might be able to get an actor or two that actually is on a TV show, a current TV show, or even someone that's auditioning or trying to get some of those roles, some of those guest starring roles and stuff. Production for TV has not ramped up. There's usually sort of a lull. So you can get some of these really, really good actors. A lot of them want to work in features. A lot of them that maybe work in TV, they think doing a, cool little indie feature might be good for their career. So that's the other thing. We're going to hopefully get some actors. And I'm going to, again, go through that in a minute as far as how much budget we have for that. So again, one of the things I did with this producer is we just went through and created a very rough budget, which I'll just run through in a minute. It's really, really rough, and it's just kind of the broad strokes, but it gives me some idea of sort of where the money is spent. Hopefully people listening to this are kind of up on what I'm doing. It's a $25,000 feature film, micro budget film. So the budget's basically going to break down like this. $5,000 is going to go to food. $3,000 is going to go to gas money, $2,000 to locations, $2,000 for equipment rental, the hard drives to store all the dailies and all the raw footage on. We're probably going to need about $2,000 worth of hard drives. And then the other thing is we need some workers' comp insurance. This is by law in California. I'm not sure how other states work, but you do need to pay for some workers' comp insurance. And what we can do, again, this producer has a lot of experience and connections. There's production companies out there that just basically have this workers' comp insurance, like they're paying for it every month, whether they use it or not, because they're shooting commercials, they're shooting, industrials, they're just production houses that always carry this insurance. And you can kind of piggyback onto them, and you will obviously pay them, but then that product company will come on as a production company, and you will give them some sort of a producer credit, an executive producer credit, and then you will also pay them some amount of money. If you just go and get this insurance, the producer was thinking it might cost you close to $10,000. Obviously, on a $25,000 film, we can't afford that. But if you can get in with one of these production companies that already has it, they're already paying for the insurance, so they don't necessarily mind just basically putting the production under their entity, and then you pipe into their insurance. And obviously you need a relationship with them, but then you give them credit. And again, some of these, and we will have to pay them. Right now we're budgeting $1,000, $1,000 or $2 for that. But that can really bring down that expense, obviously, from $9,000 or $10,000. So what I just rattled off is about $15,000. So that's basically sort of the hard cost of production, is just this $15,000. The everything else. So then there's another $10,000, which basically goes to post-production, editor. There's a couple of very technical things that have to be done with the film, the color correction, a sound mix. These are things you can't mess up. When you try and sell your film, they're going to check these things, and they've got to be up to professional standards. So you probably have to pay. There's not like a film student you can get to work necessarily for free or for credit on some of these types of very technical technical things. As I said, the distributors will check for these, and they will make you run a report to make sure all of that stuff, the sound levels are right, and they won't be able to sell your film. It's this, once you go into different kinds of countries, different countries have different production standards, and they test the films. The sound levels can't be all over the place. As I said, you can't have drop frames. All these sorts of technical things have got to be cleaned up for a professional film that you're going to sell. So you want to make sure that those positions are hopefully paid. So the bottom line is the hard costs of this film is about $15,000, just the sort of the hard cost. Notice nobody in that budget is getting paid. Everyone has got to be basically passionate about the project and working for copy and credit. That's not always easy to get those people. Some of them will be just friends of mine that I can rope into this, and maybe I can do them a favor and vice versa. So there'll be some friends of the producers, and those types of people. There'll also be some students that are willing to work for copy and credit, and then you just got to round up and get the best people you possibly can. And that's really the key is just getting the best people you can when you really don't have any budget to pay anybody. So the last thing that I talked with my producer was he's going to go out and try and do one last round of fundraising. Once you have some money sort of set, like we actually have the money set, we're starting to put together a crew, we're starting to lock down our shooting dates. Sometimes just the fact that it becomes more real, you can then go back to some investors and potentially get them to actually put in some more money. So ideally what we're hoping to get is another $15,000, and that will give us basically $40,000, which should give us about $20,000 to make the movie. Again, that's the $15,000 in hard costs I just rattled off, probably another $5,000 into the post-production of it. So that's about the $20,000, and keep in mind these numbers are very rough at this point. There's going to be some definite slosh in it. But then we would have, if we did basically $15,000 to produce the movie, $5,000 for post-production, and then we would have about $20,000 for cast. And this is very, very important, is if you can get some people, you'd be amazed who you could get for $1,000 a day, for instance. And, there's a couple of pretty meaty roles in this script that you might only need someone for 5 days. And you could get people, they're not going to be Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt, but they're going to be people, C-level actors that, you might have heard of them or you might recognize them. They might have a little bit of sales value. They might have been in like a big movie back in the 90s or the 80s, and so they have some value, some sales value where people have actually heard of them. And, for whatever reason, their careers have slowed down. And so sometimes you can get these people to come in and work for a few days. And so that's what we're hoping to do is raise another $15,000, which will give us a total of 40, and then put that $20,000, the entire $20,000 towards the cast. So that's basically what I'm working on. Just trying to get this thing going. As I said, with a July shoot date, I've got a little bit of time, but I've got to start doing this stuff sort of on my end. I'm going to do another pass of the screenplay, and I need to probably do that probably next. Hopefully the next podcast episode I come on and say, hey, I'm working on a rewrite of the script, which is a one last polish. I'll go through it, and it shouldn't take me more than a week or two, I wouldn't think. Maybe I'll put it up in my writers group. I'm not really sure what the development on that will look like, but I mean, I've spent some time polishing this script just to get it to the point where it is, but I do want to take one last pass at it. And so that will be probably the next week or two. And then I start doing a shot list and start breaking down the script. Hopefully by then I'll have my production designer and I'll have my DP. I can start working with them on getting sort of some of the physical elements of this script together. So that's what I'm working on. And it is starting to come together. We got a few months. We're here in early March. So we got a few months before shooting, but there's a lot of work that goes into getting a production, especially a micro budget film where you're not paying a lot of the positions you really need to do. You need to do a lot of the legwork, and a lot of that legwork is going to just fall on me since I'm the one basically spearheading this. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing writer-director Afonso Poyart. Here is the interview. Welcome, Afonso, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me.
Sure. Thanks for having me here.
So to start out, maybe you can give us a little background about yourself, how you kind of got into the film industry and worked your way up to the point where you wrote and directed Two Rabbits.
Well, I started, directing commercials. Basically, before doing commercials, I did like motion graphics, animation, mostly post-production work. And then I started directing smaller commercials, like in the local market here in Brazil. Like a smaller city around São Paulo. And then I started to, make my way into the advertising business, directing more commercials, bigger clients. But, I always, it's funny because I got into the film business, doing films, because I wanted to do movies, like movies that play on theaters, not just commercials. And in a way, like doing those commercials was, kind of successful, and I keep doing them, like I couldn't stop doing them. Mm-hmm. So I really needed to make like a pause, like a very strong, abrupt pause into the process and say, I need to write something and so that I, make the switch, to the real movie business. So I started writing this script, by myself. And it took me like 6 months to get the first draft ready, and I had this idea of doing something like that and for a long time, and just I decided to sit down and focus and just write, because it's plain writing, like that's it.
Yeah. Let me back you up just a little bit and go back to these early days. So you started out like just the lowest level job working as a production assistant and then slowly worked your way up to directing these commercials. Maybe you can take us through that process just so people have a clear understanding of kind of how you actually got to the point where you're directing these commercials.
Well, I started doing motion design and effects. So I started directing those motion design and effects oriented commercials, so because at that time not a lot of people understood animation and post-production. It was maybe like early 2000s, so it wasn't so big yet, so it was very common for motion graphics guys starting to direct, like getting like small assignments as director into those CG oriented commercials, so I started doing really small commercials, and really having this creative job as a director, and then I started getting bigger commercials,
And what exactly is motion graphics? Maybe you can just describe what that actually means.
Like packaging a TV station graphics, so that animation of logos and all that stuff, and like that's motion, like working with After Effects. It's a software basically that does all the motion graphics. So I was a After Effects guy and an editor also, so that was the foundation on everything,
And how did you learn that stuff? Did you go to film school or did you just pick it up on your own?
Just by my own, me and my friends, we started working, and we bought the software and started really working on it. That was like very self-taught process.
So let's talk about Two Rabbits for a little bit. Maybe to start out, you can just give us a quick pitch of the film. Tell us what the logline is.
Well, the film is basically it's about a guy that he wants to do something about the corruption and the crime, so that is very common here in Brazil, the corruption and the criminals, So he decides to make a plan to end up with corrupt guys and criminals in a single blow. That's why it's two rabbits. Two rabbits, it's like two birds in English. So he wants to kill those two, like a criminal faction and a corrupt politician in one single blow. So he makes a very complex plan. But, actually the movie starts to evolve, and you understand that's not his plan, actually. He has a much more personal agenda, and it's a big reveal, The movie, it's a very fragmented narrative, so you start to understand his actual real plan, as the movie progresses, But the basically concept, it's, you think he's doing like a justice, kind of a justice with his own hands, kind of thing, against corrupt politicians and criminals,
Okay, and so where did this story come from? Like, where was sort of the genesis or the seed of this story?
Well, basically, it's an idea that I had like for a long time, just because we keep seeing in Brazil, since I was very young, a lot of, the news are full of stories about corruption and then full of stories about crime. And I wanted to do something like that, you know, that had like a normal guy standing up against those two strong forces, you know. But as I started writing, I understood that was not enough, you know. I needed to make something personal for the guy, you know. So that's why there is this big twist, and it becomes something in a more personal and a more emotional kind of for the main character, you know. But that was the idea.
Okay. And take us through your writing process a little bit. You said it took 6 months to write this script. You know, how much do you write per day? Were you also directing commercials while you were writing the script, so you didn't work on it full time? But maybe just take us through your writing process a little bit.
Well, my writing process is kind of chaotic. I think, you know, I don't have like a method. I just, you know, I feel that for you be able to write something, you need really to, you know, have some organization on putting some hours in a day, you know, like you need to get some hours and just exclusively put those hours into the writing, you know. And some days you just don't write anything, you know. It's just like you just write bad stuff, but some days you just write good stuff, you know. If you just, it's something that you need to do, you know. You need to sit there and put like 3 hours of writing every day, you know. That's what I did. I used my nights basically because I was always doing my you know, I have a production company, so I was basically doing my stuff at the company at daytime, and then at nights I, you know, just got my screenwriting software and just, you know, wrote. And some days not so productive, some other days very productive, you know. That was the process.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of a vetting, what kind of process do you have once you get sort of a rough draft or a first draft? How did you start to get that out? Do you have friends that you would get notes on and then you would do rewriting? What was that process like?
Yeah, you know, because Dois Coelhos is such a fragmented, non-linear kind of movie, I did some flow charts, you know, that was also part of my process. I created like some graphical flow charts that I could, you know, with the scenes, so I could like freely try to reorganize or rearrange the order of the sequence. I don't know if that makes sense, but, you know, because I wanted to do something very non-linear and kind of playing a guessing game with the audience. So I did that. And of course, I like to have like a kind of a script doctor, somebody that I can just send the script and somebody outside the process totally that could read and just give me some insights. That I did that, you know, and in Dois Coelhos, and in my next movie here that I wrote also here in Brazil, I did the same, and it was very valuable because sometimes you just get lost into things that are not so important, and having somebody from outside just to look at it and say, you need to stick to those, you know, the core of the story, you know, don't forget to stick to those important points, you know, because it's very easy as a, you know, a creative person, you're like writing, you can just give a lot of importance to some character or some part of the story that, you know, it's not so important like you think, you know, and sometimes it's good to have somebody from outside just to take a look, you know.
Yeah. One of the things that I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this, because it was sort of a nonlinear story, there's a lot of characters, there's a lot of subtlety in these various storylines. It all kind of comes together at the end, but I can see this being a very difficult script as an outsider to read this script and come back with any kind of notes. Like I can see reading the script and being very, very confused. The movie was not as confusing because you actually see the actors and so you can kind of visually follow it, but just seeing it on paper with a person's name, it seems like that could get very confusing. Did you ever run into that where people are giving you notes like, what are you talking about? What's going on?
Yeah.
But you could see in your head because you know these characters, but you could see they wouldn't. Did that ever happen?
Well, you know, I got a lot of positive feedback from people, you know, regarding the structure. People didn't felt so confused, you know. They kind of course, with the visual elements, as the film is, you know, it's much easier to understand. But I didn't get quite a lot of problems with that. I had like, when I was trying to finance the movie, some people thought it was so violent. That was the major thing. They thought for the Brazilian market was like a very violent script, like Pulp Fiction violence, or like with and that was kind of that's why I couldn't get it financed so easily, in the end. But not because of the structure, I think. People get it.
And let's talk about that for a minute, about getting this film financed. So once you finished the script, what were your next steps to actually raising money?
Yeah, that's a funny thing, because I went to some people that finance movies here in Brazil that are basically the distributors, like they act like the studios here. And people didn't, I was a first-time director, very hard to, they felt that the movie was too ambitious also, because it had a lot of action sequences, and they said, you can't do with this budget, you can't do it. But I because of my background as a producer and a guy that knew effects and stuff, I knew that I could do it, just putting a lot of hard work. So I had problems with that. So what I did was a crazy thing. Yeah, I financed the movie myself,
Okay.
And at the time I was, my company had some, capabilities of financing part of the movie, and that's what I did. I was kind of a crazy for getting this movie done. I didn't wait for the governmental mechanisms that we have here in Brazil. So part of the money was financed through my personal resources, and part was government's incentives here in Brazil. Like you put your script there, and then they award you with some money. So basically that was the story.
Okay. And talk about just quickly, you said you went to some of these Brazilian distributors. How did you get those meetings, or how did you build those relationships with those people?
Well, basically,
even to get a meeting.
Yeah, it was like I was, with people that I knew that did movies before. They gave me names and they hooked me up with some people. I didn't see not a lot of people, just maybe 3 or 4. They all said no, you can't do this movie with. At the time, it was like $1.5 million. Like the budget. You can't do it with these amounts. And I said, I can. And so nobody financed the movie. That's the end of it. And very curiously, one of the companies that said, no, I can't see this movie being made like this. They after the movie was done, I came back to them and showed the movie, and then they became the distributors, and then they distribute nationwide here. And it was a big open here in Brazil, but they couldn't do it with the script, that's.
Yeah. Was there ever any thought, like one of the things that occurs to me, and I've never been Brazil, and I'm sort of the typical American, probably don't know nearly enough about the rest of the world as I should, but was there ever a concern? You wrote a script about government corruption, and then on the second hand, you're also saying we were looking to get some of these some government money. Was that ever, is that ever a concern, that there's a conflict of interest, and maybe some of these government workers maybe won't be that high on a script that's, showing government corruption?
Well, actually, no. There is other scripts here that got financed that talks about that in a much tougher way. I feel that Brazil is like a democracy. So those finance mechanisms, they are very, detached from political agendas. That's a good thing. You can really finance a movie that talks a lot of bad things about the governments. That's crazy, but you can. And it's very, that's what I felt, and that was not the problem at all. Since we got like half of the money out of those mechanisms. So.
Okay, so let's talk a minute just about advice for filmmakers that are coming up? I get a lot of emails through my website from people outside of the US, and a lot of people in other countries outside of the US, they feel like that the film communities in their countries are maybe not that open to them for whatever reason. And I'm always telling them, listen, local opportunities are really your best bet. Maybe you could just give some advice for people that are trying to break into the film business, in Brazil specifically. What advice would you have for them?
Well, I always say to, people that want to get into this business, and become really a director, I feel that you need to shoot something. You need to really make your movie, There are so many great, the technical part's not a big problem anymore. You have like cameras, you have like, it's not, it's much more accessible, the technical part. So you can do a lot of stuff with not a lot of money. That's what I say. You need to invest in something that is not so expensive, so it's easier for you to finance. You don't need a lot of money to do great stuff. To be honest, we have a lot of examples like that, like Tangerine, or many great movies that were done with not a lot of resources, but with a lot of passion. With the right actors, there is a lot of great actors that doesn't cost a lot of money, and they are interested in doing a great job. And it's all about showing your work. If you really have and if you do like that, you have more control. Control is everything. That's why I think it's the best bet to really, like you said, invest in the local markets, because that way you can have more control of your material. So you're going to do like a better job ultimately. That's what I feel, And then you give the next step, but you need to break in at somewhere. So just do it, go ahead and do it. Don't wait too much. That's what I feel.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about what sort of happened. You got Two Rabbits done, it's produced, and now you're starting to get it distributed. What did that sort of do to your career as a writer, as a director? You just directed a big movie, SYS. So I wonder if you can kind of bridge that gap between Two Rabbits and sort of what you're currently working on. Because I think that's kind of the dream, is that you do your independent film, and then that kind of gets you to that next level. So maybe you can kind of talk about that experience of getting Two Rabbits out into the world and how that helped you.
Well, when Two Rabbits opened here in Brazilian theaters, a guy, which is my manager now, Brent Travers, saw the trailer at Sundance. Somebody showed at him at Sundance. And then he liked a lot the trailer, and he came to Brazil to watch the movie in theaters here. And then he watched it, and then we set up a meeting, and he said, you need to go to the US. I need to present you some agents. You have a kind of a style that I feel that, you can get some jobs there. You can direct movies there. I said, okay, let's do it. And then I got an agent, which is a great agency, UTA. They represent me, a very good agent there. And he started showing my Dois Coelhos 2 studios and producers around town. And I spent like maybe 2 months in LA meeting people, like they say the couch tour. So I did a couch tour, and I got a lot of scripts and started writing. And, I finally ended up, with SYS, getting hired by New Line at the time. It was a New Line movie that became independent. But that was it, I got a good agent and a good manager, but it was all via Dois Coelhos. I feel, that was it.
And I always like to kind of get a sense of the scope. So you had this one manager, he flew down to Brazil, he saw your movie, you met, and you signed with him. Were there other managers and agents also interested in Two Rabbits and also talking with you that maybe you didn't go with?
Well, no, the manager that came here, it's a guy that already has a lot of eyes towards Brazil. He's Wagner Moura's manager, the guy that did Pablo Escobar on Netflix. And he has some clients here in Brazil that he's trying to make those guys break in the US market. So he had that eye already. And then he introduced me to some agents. And then I liked a lot my agent, and I made a deal with UTA, and I'm very happy with them,
Yeah. So, okay, great. Maybe you can, just to end the interview, tell us how people can keep up with you. If you're on Facebook or Twitter, you can mention your Twitter handle. Just anything you feel comfortable sharing so people can kind of follow along and find out what you're working on.
Well, I'm more actively on my Facebook, which is Afonso Poyart. That's where I am. I always post my stuff there. Like there are movie clips there. There are pictures of, I'm always sharing my thoughts around there.
Okay, perfect. I will grab that link and I'll put it in the show notes so people can click over to that. Afonso, this is a great interview. Very original movie. I watched it last night. Very original, interesting, entertaining movie. So well done on that front. When is it going to be released into the United States? Do you have a schedule on that?
I think it's mid-January already. It's about to be released. Yeah.
Yep. And it's going to be video on demand. We'll get a theatrical release?
I think it's going to be already. It's VOD, directly to VOD. Okay. Yeah, that's what I think.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Well, Afonso, again, thank you for coming on and talking with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Ashley.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Bye. Thanks.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each one of the readers on our website, and you can pick the one who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, character, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, and recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We provide analysis on features and television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your project ideas, this is a great way to do it. You can just submit a short treatment and our readers will read it and give you an analysis on it. We will also write a logline and synopsis for you. You can add this as a standalone service, or you can purchase this as a standalone service, or you can add it to an analysis. So basically what the reader would then do is they would read your script, they would write a professional logline, write a professional synopsis of the script, and as I said, you can also add that to an analysis, so you could also get an analysis as well. As a bonus, if your script gets a recommend from a reader, you get a free email and fax blast to my list of industry contacts. This is the exact same blast service I use myself to promote my own scripts, and it's the same service I sell on the website. It's a great way to get your script into the hands of producers who are looking for material. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. I want to mention one thing, and this really piggybacks on what I just promoted, which is the script analysis service and the bonus that I give out. One thing I'm noticing, I've now this script analysis service is about a year old. I think I launched at the end of February last year, so it's just a little over a year old. So in that time, we've only given out I think 8 recommends. So basically 8 people have gotten this free email and fax blast. One of the things I was worried about, the people, the way my system works, when you get the email and fax blast, you join SYS Select, and then I actually help you with your logline and your query letter inside the SYS Select forum. And it's all like the process of that is set up. You basically pay for SYS Select. You get an automated email that says, okay, join this. And so the point to all that is, when I was giving out this as a bonus, basically you get a recommend from a reader, you get a free blast. I was a little worried because those people are not necessarily in SYS Select. So I wasn't sure how I was going to handle the query letter and the logline, which goes in the query letter. I just wasn't sure how I was going to handle that because I couldn't necessarily let them into the forum because all the SYS Select leads are in the forum. So I just was concerned that I might get a bunch of really half-baked query letters from people that had recommends, and then I would have to work with them, I guess, via email, and it would just be a real nuisance since it's sometimes difficult to the forum makes it very easy to basically critique stuff, and then I give notes, they give revision, I give more notes, and it keeps everything nice and organized in a thread. Becomes somewhat difficult in emails. You know, if someone sends an email and then they don't hear back from me, they send another one, and then I've got 2 emails and I can't remember which one I responded to. So the sending emails is not a great way to necessarily critique someone's logline and query letter. All that to say, I was a little bit worried about giving out these recommends, but my worry, one of the things I'm noticing is that there was nothing really to worry about. And it really hit home with this last week. We did give another recommend, and I did a blast for this writer, and he sent me his query letter, and his query letter was excellent, and his logline was very good too. And one of the things I'm noticing, and I think people should really think about this, is when someone gets a recommend, and this is so far with every single case, all 8 of these recommends, I think there's been 1 or 2 people who, for whatever reason, they didn't want the email and fax blast for that script, or they just haven't taken me up on it yet. So it's probably only maybe 6 or 7. We've given 8 recommends in the 1 year time, and I think 6, maybe 7 have actually taken me up on the email and fax blast that they've won. So in every single case, the query letter comes, they send me the query letter. In every single case, the query letters are well written and the log lines are well written. Now, this doesn't mean there's not some, you know, some critique or some things that could be improved. Everything could always be improved, but for the most part, these query letters and log lines they're submitting are very, very good. And I think that's worth noting is that there's a real correlation between having a good script. These people are getting recommends on their scripts. So, and we don't give out a lot of recommends. Obviously, we've only given 8 since we started the service over a year ago. So I think there's definitely a real correlation between writing a good script and also being able to write a good logline and query letter. And I point this out because I get a lot of people emailing me saying, oh, I've written this great script, but I'm not good at loglines and query letters. And I always cringe a little bit thinking, I bet their script isn't as good as they think it is. And I generally don't read their script, so I never necessarily know. And I want to point out, this is not written in concrete, and I'm not implying that if you can't write a good query letter and logline, then your script is garbage. I'm not implying that, but I bet there's a strong correlation, and I bet that's something to consider with your own work. If you're struggling with your query letter and you're struggling with your logline, it may mean that you just need to continue to write and continue to improve, because as I said, I'm seeing a definite correlation between a really, really good query letter and logline and the people that are getting recommends. I have not had any of these people that were awarded these recommends. None of them have submitted query letters and loglines that were garbage. And I do see that in the SYS Select Forum. There are definitely a lot of people submitting loglines and query letters in the SYS Select Forum that need a lot of work. So far, all of these recommends are, they're in the top 5 or 10% in terms of quality and getting through. And a lot of these things are not subjective. It's like there is you get to a certain point and it becomes subjective, but a lot of it is not subjective. It's just, it's a well-written professional query letter. And yeah, I could critique it and I could come up with things that, well, you could do this a little bit better. But that's only like the last 5 or 10%. And when I see a lot of these query letters and loglines in the SYS Select Forum, they're just not even professionally written. The writers have not even taken the time to really understand what an effective query letter is, how to write an effective logline, and they really have barely taken a step. A lot of the people in the SYS Select Forum sort of fall into that. A lot of them don't. A lot of them have excellent query letters and excellent loglines. But I'm just throwing that out there, something to consider. I'm seeing a definite correlation between these people that are getting high scores from my readers, and they also seem to have pretty good log lines and query letters. So think about that as you start to promote your own script. So quick about what I'm doing next week on the podcast. I'm going to be interviewing writer and director Jody Wheeler and his producer partner, Steve Parker. They recently did a film called The Dark Place. We talk through how the project got off the ground, how they raised money for it. We go back on, I think mostly in Jody's case, since he's the writer-director, we talk a little bit about his early career and kind of how he broke into the business. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Afonso. I talk about this quite often on the podcast, but getting a low-level job and working your way up, it really is the number one way people succeed in this business. I talk to people, they come on the podcast. You can listen to all the podcasts. Time and time again, I talk to people, and the way they broke into the business was just getting some sort of a job in the entertainment industry, production assistant, working in an office. In Afonso's case, it was doing this motion graphics. And he learned a skill. He learned this skill, and that's how he kind of got into the business. Again, I want to really emphasize too, go back and listen to this interview, listen to what he said. He just took the initiative and he learned this skill. It wasn't something somebody forced upon him. It wasn't something he necessarily learned in school. He just wanted to get into the business. He thought this was a cool niche, and that's a great way to do it. So it takes some initiative, some just self-discipline and some initiative. That's really absolutely key. Nobody was calling him, hey, learn motion graphics. Hey, I'll pay you to do this. He learned it and he got good at it. And then he got in there as a professional and slowly worked his way up. And now he is writing and directing his films. The other thing I would really emphasize about this particular film is I would recommend watch this film. I think it's a really good film. It's interesting. It's cool. It's very, very stylized. And one of the things he did really, really well was he used this background in this motion graphics. He used it in the film, and it gives the film a really unique, stylized, original feel. And, the script is pretty good. The act is pretty good. The action's pretty good. But all those things together he just makes it really, really stylized. I mean, as I said, obviously the film works on other levels too, but his using his background in the motion graphics really gave this film a unique look, something I've never really quite seen. It just had an aesthetic to it. And so I recommend seeing the film. If you don't have time to watch the film, even just go and watch the trailer, because you can see a lot of this motion graphics in the trailer, and he uses that in the film to great effect. I think it's really a cool little thing. And that's not necessarily something I can do. It's not necessarily something maybe you can do, but I think it's worth noting that he's taking something from his background and then mixing it and using it and putting that into the film to give him something original and creative. I mean, for myself, I've been working as a screenwriter for years, so hopefully with my film, the thing that will stand out is the script. Hopefully I have a little bit of an advantage over someone like him that's been working in motion graphics. Hopefully I have a little bit of an advantage over him as a screenwriter. But hopefully there's something in your films there's something in your scripts. There's something about you that's a little bit unique and original, and hopefully you can get that into your projects, because as I said, it just gives it a nice, original, fresh take on something that is, maybe we've seen it before, but not quite like this. And it's the old give me the same but different. He gave it a nice little twist, and the motion graphics are definitely a cool part of this film. So as I said, if you can check out the film, check out the film. If you don't have time for that, definitely check out the trailer. It's only a couple minutes long, and you can see kind of what I'm talking about in that. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.